Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? Good. Hey, I want to take us back to last week. I made a little bit of a Super Bowl prediction. Let's talk about that for a moment, all right? All right, let's say I said 28-24 Seahawks over the Patriots. It was 29, I don't know, like 13-14. It was a terrible football game, let's just be honest. But we don't condone gambling here. But if you gambled on my prediction, 10% to the church, 25% to me, all right? I can give you my Venmo after we get finished here this morning. But I hope you had a good time with the Super Bowl last week. I want to take football, and some of you are going to be happy with this. I'm going to put it on the shelf because football season really doesn't start back till the fall, or August time frame. I want to talk about something else today. I want to talk about my second car. Was this car, 1992 Ford Pro. Now, I love this car. It was a great little car. It was kind of futuristic for its time. I mean, if you kind of look at it, it's kind of got that futuristic look to it. But there's a couple of elements to it that were really kind of neat. When you turned on your headlights, the headlights actually popped out of the front of the hood. And so that was sort of this neat thing. Not many other cars did that. When you turn them off, it goes down inside the hood. So it's kind of a neat part to the car. Another part that I found pretty interesting about the vehicle was it had the mechanical seat belts. Some of you maybe remember that, where you open the door and it's like, bzzz, it goes to the front, right? It's attached there, and then you sit down, you shut the door, and it's like, bzzz, it goes over your shoulder. You start to put the lap belt on, but it's like, man, this is kind of neat, except for a couple times where I tried to get out of the car a little too fast and got my head stuck in there, but everything was okay. But I love these two elements of this particular vehicle. But maybe my favorite part of this car was that it was a 5-speed manual transmission. It was a stick shift. There you go. Some of you in here are like, what is that? And I've never heard of that before. Most of our cars today are automatic, right? We put it in drive and we just kind of go. Or I guess now you spin the little button knob and it puts it into gear. If you've never driven a stick shift before, and I really have to watch my mouth today. Yeah, you get it. You take, I should have said that. You control the gear that you go into, right? So you have a clutch, and you have your gas, and you have your brakes, and you're in control, and you shift the gear into the gear that you want it to, that stick shift into the gear you want to, so you can drive. Some of you are like, oh, I got that in my car. I have those little triptonic things on the stick. No, not the same. Okay, you got to use that clutch there for this to experience it. But here's the deal. If you've ever driven a stick shift before, you know, like if you put it in second gear and you try to go 60 miles an hour for a long period of time, kaboom, right? It's going to blow your engine. Like the only way that you can continue to move further and faster is if you change and shift the gears within that car. Today we're going to begin this brand new series called Relationships, and over the next 4 weeks we're going to talk about really some simple shifts that we can make in the relationships that we have that can strengthen our relationships, that can heal them, that can protect them, and also make them go further. Because let's face it, if you're a human, you're in relationships, right? In fact, we were created for relationships. We go back to the book of Genesis, chapter 2. It says, then the Lord God said, it is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper who is just right for him. Here is God who sees Adam, and Adam is connecting with the animals. And that's who he has to have relationships with. And God's like, this isn't quite working the way that I want it to work. And so what does God do? God says, all right, I want to create another human being so that he can be in relationship with that human being. So what does he do? He creates a woman. And it's in that moment that we have relationships begin. And from that very first relationship, now we understand that we are created to be in relationships with other people too. And if you're in relationships with other people, you know what that means? It means they're going to be messy. Some of you here today are in messy relationships. You're in relationships where there's broken trust, where there's emotional hurt, where there's shame and guilt, maybe even distance between you and that other person. Or for some of us, it could be silence. And so our hope is over these next 4 weeks, we can learn to shift before our emotional engines blow out. Well, today, I really feel like this shift we're going to talk about is going to set the tone for everything that we're going to be in this particular series. And I think it's probably the biggest issue that we face in the relationships that we have, because it's not some outside force that's affecting us. It's not those people over there that are the problem. The biggest issue I believe we all face in relationships is me. Not Chad me, but you me, okay? Yeah? All right, just maybe after this you're like, yeah, I got some issues with you. We can talk about it, okay? But like lurking down deep inside of us, there's sort of this me monster. And we don't always see it. We don't always know when it shows up because we're not always aware of it. We don't always recognize it. But when it does show up and when it's prevalent, it has the power to destroy relationships in our lives. But what is it fuels this me monster? It's one word. It's this word selfishness. See, most relationships don't blow up because somebody in their relationship is actually evil, right? They slowly drift apart. That over time, I become the center of that relationship I have with someone else. I get busy protecting my ego, protecting my wants, my time, my calendar, and I slowly begin to forget about the other person who is in that relationship with me. And so if we begin to move in that direction, what happens to that? Or what happens when I focus on me? James says it so well in chapter 3, verse 16. He says, "For wherever there is jealousy and selfish ambition, there you will find disorder and evil of every kind." That's a pretty powerful statement, but I think it's so appropriate when it comes to talking about any relationships that we have. James says here, look at that, it says selfishness creates disorder, right? It creates chaos. And so if your relationships feel chaotic, if your marriage is crumbling, if your friendships are broken, if family members are hiding from you, you can't just say, well, that's just bad luck, right? Like there's something more that's taking place. And it very well may be that I have become the center of my relationships with other people. How would I know if that's the case? How would I know if I am the center of the relationships I have with others? There's a couple of signs you can look for. Let me share 3 of these with you. First, you're a self-talker. It means you dominate conversations with stories about yourself. Like as the other person's talking, you already formulate, hey, I'm going to make sure that I talk about me as soon as they get finished. So if you do that, maybe you're the center of your relationships. Maybe that you're a one-upper. One of my college roommates was a great one-upper. You'd be telling a story about yourself, and he was ready to go, and he'd give this other story, and it was always one up over where you were. And this could be better and bigger stories, but it can be, and I know this isn't a word, it could be worser stories too, right? Like you could be telling the worst story in the world, and like, oh, I got one for you. And so if you're a one-upper, it's possible that you are the center of the relationships that you have. And then there's a priority gap. You believe that all your issues and all the things you're going through, and even your calendar, is so much more important than anybody else's. And there's this gap there between where they are and where you are. And you see that, and you let them know that your life is more important than theirs. If this is you, it's possible that you've made yourself the center of all your relationships. And if that's the case, then that is this word, selfishness. Selfishness doesn't usually come quickly. It's sort of this slow leak that, one day you don't just wake up and like, hey, you know what I'm going to do today? I'm going to ruin my marriage, and I'm going to ruin my friendships and all the relationships I have. That's not how selfishness works. Selfishness is sort of this slow leak that takes place, and we begin to invest our time into other things. Maybe we begin to invest more time into work or our hobbies or our kids or doom scrolling. We don't plan on being selfish people. It just sort of happens over time. Like I never meant for this to happen, but it takes place, and then the next thing you know is that I replace us. That's me at the center of my relationships. That is the chaos that comes when that me monster takes over. How do we get to this place? And how can I fix it? And maybe the better question is, what's missing? Well, what's missing is a pretty simple word. It's this word empathy. You might be thinking, what is empathy? And I've heard that before. How do you define it? Empathy is defined as the ability to identify with or understand another's situation or feelings. And put another way, empathy is when we're able to step into someone else's shoes and understand where they're coming from. There's a great example of this in the book of Romans. Romans is a letter that Paul writes to Christians in Rome. And in it, in chapter 12, he writes these words. He says, rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn. That's empathy. Empathy is when we adjust our emotional temperature to match the other person. So what does Paul say here? He says, rejoice with those who rejoice. We celebrate with those who celebrate. But then on the flip side of that, it says, mourn with those who mourn. We grieve with those who grieve. And so empathy is this feeling where I'm not making myself the center of this relationship, but I am putting myself into the shoes of the people that I am connected to. You might be saying, okay, why is this so important? Well, empathy is the number one predictor of relational satisfaction in any relationship. Let me say that one more time. Empathy is the number one predictor of relational satisfaction in any relationship. And so if you struggle with empathy, you probably struggle in many of the relationships that you have. And if you struggle within your relationships, there's probably chaos in that. And if there's chaos in your relationships, there might be a pretty good chance it's because you're the center of that relationship. And in the end, selfishness and empathy, like those two things, they just can't coexist. We choose one way or the other. How can I know if I'm selfish? How can I know if I don't have empathy? There's a pretty simple diagnostic test that we can ask ourselves, really a question we can ask ourselves to help us understand where we fit on this. And it's a simple question. Here it is. Do I keep score? All right. We're actually going to spend a whole day and a couple of weeks talking about this particular question. Do I keep score in the relationships I have? So how do I know if I'm keeping score? Here might be some questions internally you ask yourself, okay? I did dishes 3 times this week. How many times did they do it? All right. Have you ever done that before? You're like, I've done it 3, they've done it once or 0. That might be an issue. I cleaned the toilets twice this week. How many times did they clean the toilets? Probably none because nobody wants to do that job. I worked 20 hours on this project for this presentation. I'm going to take some time to calculate how much time my coworkers put into this. Right? It's not just people that we're married to or people that we're dating. I mean, this could be in any relationship that we have, that we begin to keep score. And if our relationships are all about keeping score, then that means our relationships for us are all about transactions. And so when you keep score for people you say you love, you care about, that you're friends with, they actually become opponents. They're not teammates. They're opponents. They're competition. But that's not how empathy works. Empathy says we are in this together. That no matter how many times you've cleaned the toilet, I don't care, right? I'm not keeping score for that because we're in this together. I want us to be together in this. We aren't opponents. We aren't competitors. We're teammates. And I think empathy is one of the hardest things for us to be able to show. So how do we work through that? Can we have a pattern of behavior with empathy? How does empathy work? Well, empathy doesn't just happen, okay? Empathy is actually, I believe, a skill that we have to learn. And I think the best place it begins is with some words Paul writes in the book of Philippians. It really kind of piggybacks off of what James says. And it's possible Paul had read what James said or had heard this teaching from somebody who had heard from James in the past. And so maybe there's some reasons why this is similar. But in Philippians chapter 2, here's what Paul writes to the people at the church in Philippi. He says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of the others. Paul isn't writing here to a group of mean people. Right? He's not writing to a group of people that are evil or a group of people he doesn't like. These are actually people he likes. And if you read the book of Philippians, he's very positive about this group of Christians there in this church. He's writing to normal people like you and me. But he's writing to normal people who are in relationships with others. And so as we read this, notice what Paul doesn't say. He doesn't say ignore yourself. He says, look at your interests, right? That's a big part of it, but also the interests of others. And where does that begin? He says it begins about being humble people. And humbleness means humility in action. It says, I matter, but so do you. And so for us to become empathetic people, we have to humble ourselves. We have to put ourselves in the place of other people's. We have to see life from their perspective and not just my own. And humility, as Paul says, hey, we can look at ourselves, but we're working to put the other person above us. See, when we are humble people, it's not about trying to fix that other person or to agree fully with that other person or to absorb their emotions or to make it all about you. Empathy is understanding where they're coming from. It's being present in that moment, in that time with them. It's saying, I hear and see you and I understand what you're going through. That is this act of humility that we can show. That is this empathy that we can give to other people. And so let me share with you some practical ways we can live out empathy. And maybe for most of us get away from this me monster that we face. Here's 3 quick thoughts here. First one is slow down your inner voice. We kind of talked about this in our last series, one of the weeks. We aren't bad people. We're just preoccupied people. Right? There's a lot going on in our lives. And yet when we're preoccupied, when someone else is talking, it's very easy for our minds to be racing. And so as they're talking, we're already kind of thinking about a rebuttal to what it is that they're saying, or we're forming a judgment about them and what they're saying, or we're comparing our stories internally to what they're saying, or even we're thinking about, I've got to hurry up because I got this thing on my calendar and I've got to get to this. And my calendar is much more important than this thing, this issue, this problem that this person is sharing with me. Empathy starts when we quiet this internal voice that speaks very, very loudly to each one of us. It's a simple shift in how we think. Instead of thinking, how do I respond? Ask yourself, what is this person actually feeling? Like, what are they going through in their life? What's underneath everything that they're saying? And just taking that kind of small shift can begin to retrain our brain. So just slow down that inner voice that I know is preoccupied all the time. Second thing I would say is separate intent from impact. Here's a phrase, probably heard a few times. You never listen to me. Never heard that one before? When you hear those words, your brain begins to scream out, that's not true, right? Empathy doesn't yell, you're lying, when someone says, you never listen to me. Empathy says, hey, help me understand when you feel unheard. Even if their perception is not your intention, like their emotional experience is real for them. And so living out empathy within our relationships is filling that gap between the intent that is there and the impact that can have without being defensive. And sometimes we jump into defensive mode. So separate those two, intent and impact. And the last one is remember your vulnerable moments. Sometimes your empathy grows for other people that when you're having this conversation, you kind of take yourself back to something you experienced in your own life. And maybe it could have been something traumatic. It could have been a moment where you felt alone. It could have been a moment where you felt dismissed or hurt, or you just needed someone there for you. And so as you're having this conversation with someone that you can tell is hurting, and that inner voice is going crazy, and you're trying to think of some rebuttal to be defensive, don't do that. Go back to the moment for you in your life that was hard and tough for you. And again, in that, so often it'll take us to this place that softens and strengthens our empathy to someone else. So remember those vulnerable moments in your life. Just a few things I think we can do to learn to be empathetic towards other people. And being empathetic can begin to shift us out of that selfishness into who we are called to be and created to be within the relationships that we have. Now, some of you are here right now and you hear selfishness and empathy and listening and all this, and you're thinking being empathetic is a weakness. If that's where your mind goes, and you think empathy is a weakness, then that means that you're saying that Jesus was weak. And Jesus was so far from being weak. I love this passage in Matthew chapter 9, verse 35 to 36. It says, Jesus traveled through all the towns and villages of that area, teaching in the synagogues and announcing the good news about the kingdom. And he healed every kind of disease and illness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were confused and helpless. Here's Jesus, and he's looking at these crowds and all the people around him, and he knows he's came to serve them, not to be served by them, but to serve them. But he also knows that in a very short time, he's going to give his life for these people. And so we see here, it says he had compassion on them because they were confused and helpless. The Greek word for compassion right here is this incredibly strong word and very hard to pronounce word. Here it is, splagnetheus. And most of you don't even know if I said that correct or not. Joel is probably the only one, if he's in here, would know that. But this term actually comes out of another word that means your bowels, all right? So when we see this word compassion right here, this big Greek word that's up on the screen, it means to be moved in your gut. And so here's Jesus, who was deeply, deeply moved by what he saw around him. And so he has this desire to be present with confused and helpless people. He has this desire to help them and to listen to them. Like, that's what empathy is all about. And so to be empathetic is not a weakness. I would tell you that to be empathetic means that you have this incredible strength inside of you. And you don't have empathy if you're self-focused. You don't have empathy if that me monster rules every relationship that you have. You don't have empathy if you're keeping score for every connection you have in life. You have empathy when you feel you actually see people where they are. And when you see people where they are, selfishness will mean that you'll move away from people. But if you see them where they really are, empathy will move you towards them. By the way, just like we see here with Jesus. So with all of that sort of as a background, selfishness, this me monster, empathy, what are next steps that we can take to help shift us from me to us in the relationships that we have? Well, let me give you 4 next steps that you can take. The first one I would say is ask better questions. How many times are we with people that we know, we care about, we love, and we're just like, hey, how you doing? How's your day going? Like, those aren't bad questions to ask, but maybe sometimes we need to dig a little deeper, and we need to ask some better questions. Maybe questions like this: what's something that is a struggle for you right now? You ever asked your spouse that before? Probably not. It's not a normal question we ask, but maybe that's a question we should ask. Another question is, what's something that's been weighing on you that I might not see? You probably have some close friends. Have you ever asked a close friend, what's something I don't see? Because oftentimes we don't know what's going on deep down in someone. We may think we do, but really there's more going on there. Or maybe it's a coworker. Hey, what's been draining your energy recently? Like, these are better questions for us to ask if we want to have empathy towards people, but if we really want to know where they're coming from and what's going on in their life, we ask better questions. And when we ask these questions, we're not trying to fix it, all right? If you're like me, you're Mr. Fix-It or Mrs. Fix-It. You like to, or Miss Fix-It. Like, you love to fix stuff. And so if my wife comes to me like, hey, this is going on, I'm like, okay, well, let's think through a process here so we can fix this. That's not what we do here, okay? We ask better questions not to fix it, not to explain it away, not to minimize what they said, but to be curious about their life. And oftentimes we're not very curious. So it really starts with asking better questions. But then it leads us into this next step, active listening. Before you respond to what someone has said to you, even if you've not asked a question like I just talked about, you repeat what you heard. And when you repeat what you heard, it gives credence to what they've just said. It's like, wow, you were actually listening to me in this moment as we're having this conversation. And then your response is, hey, what I hear you saying is, and then you repeat what they said. Or it sounds like you're feeling, and you repeat what they said. Or that must have been exhausting. And again, you go like X, Y, Z, what they just said. And then you kind of let that inner voice tell you to be quiet. And you just stop. Just kind of soak that in. And just small gestures like that shows that you care, you're engaged, and that you're there to listen. But then you jump in, right? This is the moment where you come in and you respond, but you don't respond with, hey, let me fix this for you, or hey, I want to feel all these emotions just like you. What we do is we respond with empathy and compassion and love. For most of us, that's going to be pretty awkward because that's not normally how we tend to function. But if we show this empathy towards other people through being active listeners, man, it begins to help them feel encouraged and cared for, and again, like I just said, and loved. And I think this is where the most incredible growth can take place in the relationships that we have. Ask better questions, actively listen. And I think part of this is a prayer. That every single day we can ask God, God, help me see people the way you see them. Hey, God, help me see people the way Jesus saw those people there in the book of Matthew. Not as interruptions, not as problems, not as issues, but as people worth slowing down for in our lives. Pray that prayer. God, help me see people the way you see them. And then the last thing I would say, maybe for some of you, like this selfishness is so thick and so heavy and so hard for you. You're not really sure how to get to this place of empathy in your life. Hey, get counseling. Sometimes you need a professional to help you walk through steps to get you to this place where you need to be. We talk about counseling a lot here at The Journey. We have a pretty unique relationship with a couple of accounting for your taxes, a couple of accounting companies. We're here to help you. I didn't think that was going to come out today. But anyway, counseling is so good. C-Space and Safe Harbor, but we'd love to connect you with that. We send so many people there. I was meet with my counselor this past week, and she's like, Chad, you guys don't know how much of an impact you have because you talk about counseling on a regular basis on Sunday morning. People come in here, and they're like, hey, that message or that conversation I had or my group, it's a big thing. And you may look around like nobody else is counseling. There's a lot of people in this church in counseling. We believe in counseling. This is a Christian organization, or both these organizations are. We'd love to get you connected. You can do that through the QR code. You can do that through our app. Go through us. Do not try to go on your own. That can get kind of messy. But go through us, and we would love for you to do that. We actually have a form that you can fill out that helps do that. But having a professional help you walk through some of these steps is such a big thing, too. And so these are just some things that we can do to help us shift from me to us. But I don't share these things with you today as a talking head. As someone saying, hey, you guys need to do this because I got it all figured out. I will let you know that this topic today probably challenged me more than any other in quite some time, because these are actually some struggles that I have in the relationships that in my life, right? In fact, let me share with you, before we moved here in 2016 for me to come on staff here at The Journey, we had planted a church down in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And before you could plant a church, you had to go through something called CPAC. It was Church Planning or Planters Assessment Center. Joel and I were laughing about this past week up here. Like if you're watching news and CPAC comes on, it's talking about a political action committee, right? So we're like, oh gosh, what happened to those church planners? Did they? It's a political thing. And so we had to do the church planning assessment center. And so you're in this, and you've got to go through this psychological profile, which is a lot of fun if you've ever had to do something like that before. And it wasn't just me, it was Kara too. We both had to go through this. And so at the end of our time, the psychologist sits down with us and looked at Kara and like, Kara, you're a realist. And Chad, you live in a dream world. And there's probably not two truer statements that have ever been said in the whole entire world than those two things, because she very much is a realist and I do tend to live in the dream world. So that was a learning piece for us. But probably the biggest learning piece for me was they looked at me and said, Chad, you need to learn to be more empathetic. I was like, wow, that hurts. Because I've been a pastor for quite a few years now, and I thought I was full of empathy, but apparently I wasn't. And honestly, I've been working on being better, being empathetic towards people and their stories and the relationships that I have with them. But then there's another piece to this. I just shared with you that I go to counseling on a regular basis to stay sane, to keep my job, to help with the relationships I have, everything you can imagine. And last year, one of the big takeaways for me in my time with my counselor, she looked at me and she's like, hey, Chad, you could really learn to be an active listener. I was like, well, I thought I was a pretty active listener, but apparently I'm not. And so we started to work through that. It's like, hey, this is what this looks like. And so some of the stuff I'm telling you today is stuff that I am working on. Like, hey, I hear where you're coming from, and this is what I'm hearing from you. Is that right? Can you talk with me about that and through that with me? And that's with any kind of relationship that I have. And I'm working on being a better active listener in those relationships. And so as I'm going through this message this week, I'm not saying, hey, these are things all of you guys need to work on. I'm listening to this and walking through this and writing this. I'm like, hey, there's things in here that I need to work on in myself. To not be selfish, to be empathetic. Because in the end, if I can take those steps in my life, if you take those steps in your life, we really become more like Jesus. I started this morning talking about my 5-speed futuristic Ford Probe. But like driving that car, you can't stay in the same gear forever. And if you stay in that gear of selfishness, man, your relationships, they're not going to go very far. And pretty quickly, and that engine that you have, that relational engine, is probably going to burn out. Remember what I said a little bit earlier? Empathy is the number one predictor of relational satisfaction in any relationship. If we can begin to shift from selfishness into empathy, it will lead to our marriages being strengthened. It will lead to our friendships beginning to deepen. It will lead to trust growing, because people don't drift away from people who understand them. People drift toward people who make them feel safe, who have this empathy for them. And safe relationships are strong relationships, and strong relationships are long-lasting relationships. And if we can live this out, not only will it change and shift the relationships we have, but I think the best part of this is that we become to look more and more like Jesus.